I'm Audrey, and I grew up in the shadow of success. That success belonged to my older sister, Vanessa. Our suburban house was always filled with people, aunts, uncles, cousins, all drawn by the promise of my mother Eleanor's famous garden parties and the chance to see Vanessa perform. Our backyard was like a private theater, with its perfectly manicured lawn and the towering maple tree that served as a natural spotlight. I can still see my father Gerald manning the grill, the aroma of charcoal and seasoned steaks mingling with the evening air, while Mom fluttered among the guests, ensuring everyone's champagne glasses stayed full. Vanessa, darling, Aunt Patricia would inevitably call out, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter like a crystal bell, "Why don't you give us one of your lovely performances?" And just like that, all eyes would shift to my sister. Vanessa would gracefully step onto the stone patio, her golden hair catching the last rays of sunset, a mischievous glint in her hazel eyes. She'd clear her throat with theatrical flair, and then pure magic would fill the air. My Heart Will Go On was her signature piece, her voice carrying the same emotional depth as Celine Dion herself. The gathered crowd would erupt in enthusiastic applause, some wiping away tears of joy. Dad would beam with unmistakable pride, while Mom would squeeze his hand, their faces glowing with parental satisfaction. Meanwhile, I'd find myself retreating to the edges of our property, trying to blend into the shadows of the maple tree. It wasn't that I didn't want to participate, I did, desperately. But every time I attempted to sing, my voice would emerge as something between a strangled cat and a rusty door hinge. Poetry? Even worse. The words would tangle themselves into knots on my tongue, leaving me red-faced and stammering before I could finish the first verse. I'd catch snippets of conversations, relatives whispering about how different I was from Vanessa. "It's hard to believe they're sisters," they'd murmur behind their wine glasses. But it wasn't just the extended family. Mom and Dad made it crystal clear who held the spotlight in our household. While Vanessa was chauffeured between dance classes, vocal coaching, and art workshops, I was left to my own devices. Not that I complained much, I found my own sanctuary in the dusty investment and business books that lined our home library's shelves. In this world of performances and expectations, only one person truly saw me for who I was: Great Aunt Diana. She'd find me in my usual hideouts, behind the garage or tucked away in my makeshift reading nook under the maple tree, always with a business or investment book in hand. "What fascinating subject are you exploring today, Audrey?" she'd ask, carefully lowering herself onto the grass beside me. Her voice carried a warmth that made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time each day. I'd look up from my book, grateful for the interruption that, for once, didn't feel like an intrusion. "I'm reading about real estate investment strategies," I'd reply, showing her the well-worn cover of my latest find. "Did you know that property value isn't just about location? It's about understanding market trends and demographic shifts too." Diana would nod, her eyes twinkling with understanding behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "You've got a brilliant mind for business, dear. Don't ever let anyone dim that light." She'd often bring me articles about successful women in business, quietly nurturing my growing interest in finance and management. Those moments with Aunt Diana were like finding an oasis in a desert, a place where I could simply be Audrey, the girl who dreamed of building her own empire, not just the quiet sister who couldn't carry a tune. She never expected me to be anyone but myself, never compared me to Vanessa, never suggested I try harder to fit into the family's performance-oriented mold. But even Diana's unwavering support couldn't completely erase the sting of being the forgotten Thompson daughter. Every time Vanessa mastered a new song or won another local talent competition, our parents would shower her with lavish gifts: designer clothes, the latest iPhone, even a brand new laptop for her creative projects. Meanwhile, I received practical items from the clearance rack and thinly veiled suggestions about finding my place. The disparity was never more apparent than during our birthday celebrations. While Vanessa's parties were elaborate affairs with professional photographers and custom cakes, mine were often afterthoughts, marked by hastily bought cards and gifts that felt more like obligations than expressions of love. The message was clear: in the Thompson household, some stars shone brighter than others. School became my sanctuary, my personal stage where academic excellence replaced musical performances. While I might not have been Miss Popular, I discovered my true element in the classroom. I refused to be a passive observer. Instead, I approached each lesson with the same intensity Vanessa brought to her performances. "Mrs. Harrison," I'd say after advanced economics class, my voice quiet but steady, "could you explain more about market elasticity? I want to make sure I fully understand how it applies to real-world business scenarios." She'd smile, clearly pleased by my genuine interest and analytical approach. "Of course, Audrey. Your questions always show such depth of understanding," she'd respond, often staying late to discuss economic theories and their practical applications. When teachers couldn't spare extra time, I'd request reading recommendations, particularly focusing on business and investment strategies. My backpack became a mobile library, heavy with books about financial markets, property investment, and business management. I'd stay up late in my room, my desk lamp casting a small circle of light as I pored over these texts, absorbing every detail about business strategies and investment principles. While Vanessa's music drifted through the walls from her evening practice sessions, I was building my own kind of expertise, even if no one else seemed to notice or care. All this dedication began to pay off spectacularly. By senior year, I wasn't just top of my class, I was running the school's investment club and had already started a small online business reselling vintage clothing, carefully reinvesting every dollar of profit. My economics teacher even asked me to tutor struggling students, which I did during lunch breaks. Meanwhile, our house had transformed into Vanessa Central as college application season approached. Mom spent countless hours helping her perfect her portfolio for the prestigious performing arts program at Juilliard. "Oh, sweetheart, this audition piece is absolutely perfect," Mom would gush, watching Vanessa rehearse. "You're going to take Broadway by storm." I'd retreat to my room, surrounded by my business plans and investment spreadsheets, trying to ignore the familiar ache in my chest. But one evening, during yet another family dinner dominated by Vanessa's college prospects, something in me snapped. "I'm applying to Wharton's School of Business," I announced, my voice cutting through their conversation about Vanessa's upcoming auditions. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, to my absolute humiliation, they all burst into laughter. "Oh, sweetie," Mom said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes, "be realistic. We can't afford 2 college tuitions, and you're just not, well, you're not Wharton material. You should focus on something more practical. Besides, Gerald's cousin Frank is always looking for help at his diner." The confrontation, I felt like I'd been slapped. Heat rushed to my face, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment, it was pure, white-hot anger. "Not Wharton material?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Let me show you something." I stormed upstairs to my room, grabbed my portfolio filled with perfect grades, investment club achievements, and the detailed business plan for my growing online venture and returned to slam it on the dinner table, right next to Vanessa's sheet music. "Look at this," I demanded, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Straight A's in every advanced business and economics class. President of the investment club. A profitable online business I built from scratch. My SAT scores are in the top percentile. So tell me, what exactly about me isn't Wharton material? They all leaned in to examine my achievements, their eyes widening in genuine surprise. Well, I'll be damned, Dad muttered, adjusting his glasses. When did all this happen? It's been happening for years, I replied, my voice ice cold. Not that any of you ever bothered to notice. You were too busy watching Vanessa's performances to see what I was building. Mom at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. Audrey, we had no idea you were so. But Dad cut her off. Look, it doesn't change the financial reality. We've invested everything in Vanessa's future. Her talent needs proper nurturing. There's simply nothing left for your business experiments. I stood there, staring at them, finally seeing with perfect clarity what I'd always known but never wanted to admit. In their eyes, I would always be second best, the supporting act to Vanessa's star performance. Fine, I said, gathering my portfolio with steady hands. If you won't support my dreams, I'll find another way. I always have. I turned and walked away, ignoring their calls. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I heard Mom saying, "She'll get over it. She always does." But this time was different. This time, something had fundamentally changed. The following months passed in a blur of focused determination. While Vanessa prepared for her Juilliard auditions, accompanied by tearful good luck wishes and endless family support, I threw myself into my own preparations with renewed intensity. During this time, I found myself spending more and more time at Aunt Diana's cozy Victorian house in the quieter part of town. Her home became my refuge, with its wall-to-wall bookshelves and the perpetual scent of freshly baked cookies. One afternoon, as we sat in her sunny kitchen nook sharing tea and homemade scones, she asked the question I'd been dreading. "So, Audrey," she said, stirring honey into her tea, her eyes kind but direct, "what are your plans after graduation? Have you heard back from any schools?" I stared into my teacup, watching the steam rise in delicate swirls. "I got into Wharton," I said quietly, then quickly added before she could celebrate, "but it doesn't matter. Mom and Dad won't help with tuition. They say they've spent everything on Vanessa's performing arts education." Diana set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "Tell me, dear, how much would you need for the first year?" I pulled out a carefully prepared spreadsheet from my bag. I'd been carrying it everywhere, running the numbers over and over. Even with the partial scholarship I received, I'd need about $45,000 for the first year. I've saved $12,000 from my online business, but... "Audrey," Diana interrupted, reaching across the table to take my hand, "I've been watching you work toward this dream for years. Your dedication, your intelligence, your business sense, they're extraordinary. I have some savings that I've been holding onto for something worthwhile. I can't think of anything more worthwhile than investing in your future." I stared at her, hardly daring to breathe. "Aunt Diana, I couldn't possibly." "You can and you will," she said firmly. "Consider it an investment, if that makes you feel better. When you're a successful businesswoman, you can pay me back with interest." She winked, and I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. The reality of what she was offering hit me like a tidal wave. I burst into tears, overwhelmed by this unexpected lifeline. "Thank you," I sobbed, moving around the table to hug her. "Thank you so much, Aunt Diana. I promise I won't let you down." Time seemed to accelerate after that conversation. Before I knew it, I was walking across the stage at graduation, my honors cords heavy around my neck. As I scanned the crowd, I saw Aunt Diana beaming proudly, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. My parents were there too, their expressions a mixture of pride and discomfort. That evening, as I organized my college acceptance materials, Mom appeared in my doorway. "Audrey, honey," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, "your father's cousin Frank called again about that waitressing position. You really should consider it, it's such a stable job." I looked up from my papers, my back straightening. Actually, Mom, I won't be needing that job. I'm going to Wharton in the fall. Dad materialized behind her, his face darkening. And how exactly do you plan to pay for that? Aunt Diana is helping me, I said firmly, meeting his gaze. She believes in my potential. The silence that followed was broken by Dad's explosive reaction. Absolutely not, he thundered, his face flushing red. If Diana has money to spare, it should go to Vanessa. She needs a car for her internship at the theater next year. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious? I asked, my voice razor sharp. This is my chance to build a future, to make something of myself. Don't be selfish, Audrey, Mom chimed in, wringing her hands. Your sister's career needs that support more than you need another degree. Business degrees are a dime a dozen, but talent like Vanessa's is rare. No, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. This is my opportunity, my future. Aunt Diana chose to invest in me, and I'm accepting. End of discussion. From that moment on, the atmosphere at home became unbearable. My parents alternated between icy silence and passive-aggressive comments. After a particularly nasty argument where Dad suggested I was stealing from Vanessa's future, I called Aunt Diana. Pack your bags, sweetheart, she said without hesitation after hearing my tearful explanation. You're moving in with me until college starts. The next morning, I loaded my belongings into a rideshare, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror. As we pulled up to Aunt Diana's Victorian house, with its welcoming porch and blooming garden, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The summer stretched ahead of me, full of possibility and free from the constant shadow of being the other daughter. Thanks to my academic excellence and Aunt Diana's support, I stepped onto Wharton's campus that fall with a mixture of excitement and determination. My first business strategy lecture felt like coming home. Every word resonated with the dreams I'd been nurturing for years. Meanwhile, Vanessa was starting her final year at Juilliard. I rarely heard from her or my parents, but through Aunt Diana's updates, I learned that things weren't going as planned. Then, about a month into the semester, my phone lit up with Diana's name. Audrey, dear, she said, her voice carrying an unusual tension, you might want to sit down for this. My heart raced as she shared the latest family drama. Vanessa had suddenly dropped out of Juilliard, announcing she was pregnant. Don't worry about it, she'd apparently told our shocked parents, tossing her golden hair with characteristic confidence. The father is from an extremely wealthy family. We'll be getting married soon. But the story took an unexpected turn. It emerged that Vanessa had been involved with multiple men, including her wealthy boyfriend's best friend. When the truth came out, her boyfriend's promises of marriage and financial security evaporated. Now they weren't even sure who the father was. I sat in my dorm room, phone pressed to my ear, torn between disbelief and a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me felt a twisted satisfaction the golden child had fallen from grace. But mostly, I felt a profound sadness for my sister and the mess she'd created. The saga continued to unfold over the following months. Through Aunt Diana's regular updates, I learned that a DNA test eventually confirmed her ex-boyfriend was indeed the father. Instead of the fairy tale wedding Vanessa had envisioned, she received a coldly negotiated child support agreement. The final irony? She ended up taking that waitressing job at Uncle Frank's diner, the very position my parents had tried to push on me. As I hung up after each call with Diana, I felt an increasingly complex mixture of emotions. The petty part of me wanted to gloat, to remind my family of their mistake in dismissing my potential. But more than anything, I felt grateful for the path I'd chosen and the aunt who'd helped make it possible. The years at Wharton passed in a whirlwind of business cases, financial models, and leadership seminars. Before I knew it, I was walking across another stage, this time receiving my business degree with honors. In the audience, Aunt Diana beamed with pride, tears streaming down her face. Thanks to my outstanding academic record and several successful internships, I secured a position as a junior manager at the Lux Heights, one of the most prestigious real estate development firms in the city. The starting salary exceeded my wildest expectations, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly successful. With my first substantial paycheck, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I visited the most exclusive electronics store in the city and purchased the latest iPhone for Aunt Diana. Her face lit up when I presented it to her. "Oh, Audrey," she gasped, turning the sleek device over in her hands, "this is far too extravagant." I smiled, already pulling out my own phone. "Not at all. Now, let me show you how to use all the features." Over the next few weeks, I taught her about social media, especially WhatsApp, which became our primary way of staying connected. She took to it surprisingly quickly, particularly loving the voice message feature. Soon, our daily communications were filled with her warm voice-sharing updates about her garden, her book club, and her famous apple pie experiments. Then one day, as I was reviewing property development plans in my office, my phone buzzed with my mother's name, a rare occurrence these days. "Audrey," her voice was hesitant, we were hoping you might come over to talk." After a long pause, I agreed to a Sunday visit. Standing on my childhood home's porch that weekend, I felt strangely detached. Inside, I found my parents, Vanessa, and my young niece whom I'd never met. The atmosphere was tense, but not hostile, as I'd feared. "You look good, kiddo," Dad said, his voice gruff but carrying a hint of warmth. "We hear you're doing exceptionally well at Lux Heights." I nodded, maintaining my professional composure. "Yes, I'm now managing several major development projects." Mom cleared her throat nervously. That's wonderful, dear. Actually, that's part of why we wanted to talk to you." Over the next hour, they attempted to apologize for their past treatment, admitting they'd been wrong to dismiss my potential. Then came the real reason for the reunion. "Audrey," Mom said, glancing at Vanessa, who was bouncing her daughter on her knee, "we were wondering if you might be able to help Vanessa get a position at your company. She's been struggling at the diner and with little Emma to think about." I studied my sister, who still wouldn't meet my eyes directly. "I'll see what I can do," I said carefully. "But I can't make any promises." True to my word, I spoke with our HR department about an administrative position for Vanessa. To my surprise, she excelled in the role. She was punctual, efficient, and her natural charm worked well with clients. As weeks passed, I found myself gradually relaxing around her. We weren't best friends, but we developed a cordial professional relationship. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, an unexpected opportunity arose. Mr. Richards, the CEO of Lux Heights, called me into his office. My heart raced until I saw his broad smile. "Audrey, how would you feel about heading up our new international division?" Soon, I was overseeing not just local developments, but projects across 3 continents. My days became a whirlwind of virtual meetings, site visits, and strategic planning sessions. It was exhausting but exhilarating, everything I'd ever dreamed of. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase, and suddenly I found myself with more money than I knew what to do with. That's when the calls from my parents started becoming more frequent. At first, it was just minor things. "The roof is leaking," Mom would say hesitantly. "We were wondering if you might be able to help out a little." I surprised myself by saying yes, finding satisfaction in being able to solve their problems with a simple bank transfer. It started with the roof repairs, then progressed to a new heating system, and before long, I was funding their entire home renovation. As their financial situation improved thanks to my monthly support, the familiar family parties resumed. But this time, the dynamic was different. Have you heard about Audrey's latest project? Mom would proudly tell relatives. She's developing luxury properties in Dubai. We're so proud of her. I'd occasionally catch Vanessa's eye across the room, and she'd give me a small, knowing smile. She was doing well too, having been promoted to senior client relations manager. My girls, Dad would say, an arm around each of us, both making their old man proud. Part of me wanted to remind them of their past dismissiveness, but a larger part basked in their approval, something I'd craved for so long. One Sunday afternoon, everything changed. I was reviewing development proposals in my home office when I received a WhatsApp message from Aunt Diana. Listen to this, her text read, followed by a voice memo from the previous night's family gathering, one I'd missed due to a business trip. I pressed play, expecting to hear typical family chatter. Instead, my mother's slightly intoxicated voice filled my ears, and Audrey, that ungrateful girl, she was saying, she barely helps us at all. You'd think with all her success she could do more for her family. That's right, Dad's voice chimed in, equally slurred. We're getting by thanks to Vanessa's hard work. Audrey just got lucky with that company. She's riding on their success, that's all. The recording continued, with various relatives murmuring in agreement. Vanessa remained silent in the background, neither defending me nor joining in. My hands trembled as I scrolled through subsequent messages where my parents desperately begged Diana to delete the recording. Diana's response was clear, I may be old, but I know exactly what I'm doing by sharing this. It's time Audrey saw the truth about how you really view her success. I sat there, staring at my phone, my mind replaying the voices over and over. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined possible. After everything, the monthly payments, the house renovations, the generous holiday gifts, they still saw me as nothing more than a lucky opportunist. With trembling fingers, I dialed Diana's number. Oh, Audrey dear, she answered, her voice full of gentle concern. I take it you've heard the recording. Yes, I managed, my voice barely a whisper. I can't believe it, Aunt Diana. All this time, even after everything. They've always been like this, sweetheart, she replied, anger evident in her usually calm voice. You just haven't been around to hear it. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you needed to know the truth. We talked for hours, my emotional state cycling through shock, anger, and grief. As evening fell over the city skyline outside my penthouse windows, I reached a decision. I'm cutting them off, I told Diana, my voice finding its strength again. No more money, no more help. They've shown their true colors. The days that followed were surreal. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my parents, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. Their words from the recording played on repeat in my mind, like a toxic melody I couldn't shake. After a week of silence, I sent them a brief, professional text. I've heard the recording. I now understand your true feelings about my success. Don't contact me regarding financial matters again. All support stops immediately. Their responses flooded in instantly. At first, they were apologetic. Sweetie, we didn't mean any of it. We were just talking nonsense. But as days passed and I maintained my silence, their tone shifted dramatically. We're your parents. You owe us. How dare you abandon your family? Each message confirmed that I'd made the right decision. Vanessa, surprisingly, remained professional at work. I'm staying neutral, she told me during a project meeting. This is between you and them. I nodded, appreciating her stance, even if part of me wished she'd acknowledge the truth she'd witnessed firsthand. As weeks turned into months, my relationship with Aunt Diana grew even stronger. Our Sunday video calls became the highlight of my week. She'd share stories about her latest gardening triumphs or show me her experiments with new bread recipes, providing a welcome sense of genuine family connection amidst the chaos. "You're doing the right thing, Audrey," she'd reassure me during moments of doubt. "Don't let them manipulate you again." True family supports each other without keeping score. To my surprise, other relatives began reaching out. Cousin Rachel, who'd always been kind at family gatherings, sent a heartfelt email. "I heard the recording, Audrey. I want you to know that I think you're incredible. What you've achieved, how you've handled everything, you're an inspiration. Don't let anyone diminish your success." Uncle Robert, Dad's younger brother, called unexpectedly. "Kid, I've watched you grow from that quiet girl with business books to this amazing woman. Your parents are fools if they can't see how special you are. You've got real family in your corner, remember that." As the year drew to a close, Mr. Richards called me into his office again. My heart was steady this time. I'd learned to trust my abilities. "Audrey," he said, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied smile, "I'm retiring next year. I want you to take over as CEO of Lux Heights." I stood there, momentarily speechless. Finally, I managed to ask, "Are you certain about this?" He nodded, his expression serious but pleased. "I've never been more sure of anything. You've transformed this company, Audrey. Our international division has flourished under your leadership. It's time you took the reins completely." As I left his office, looking out over the city skyline from our top-floor headquarters, I realized something profound. That quiet girl who'd hidden behind business books had become exactly who she'd always dreamed of being. Not because of family connections or luck, but through determination, intelligence, and hard work. Success, I realized, wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. It was about being true to yourself and your vision. The little girl who'd been overlooked had grown into a woman who couldn't be ignored, and better yet, she'd done it on her own terms. Aunt Diana insisted on throwing a celebration dinner for my CEO appointment. As we sat in my penthouse, sharing her famous apple pie and champagne, she pulled out an old photo album I'd never seen before. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a photo of a young girl curled up with a business book under the maple tree. "I took this the day you first told me you wanted to run your own company. You were 12, but your eyes held such determination." I stared at the image, remembering that day clearly. I was reading about real estate development, I recalled, smiling. Everyone else was watching Vanessa's backyard concert, but I was dreaming about building skyscrapers. "And now look at you," Diana said proudly, gesturing to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse, the city skyline glittering beyond them. "You didn't just dream about skyscrapers, you're building them." The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had spent years investing in Vanessa's performances, believing she was their ticket to success. Instead, their overlooked daughter had become the one thing they'd never expected, a self-made woman who'd achieved everything they'd dreamed of, and more. As I hugged Diana goodbye that evening, I felt completely at peace with my decisions. The recording had been a blessing in disguise, forcing me to finally see the truth I'd been avoiding. Success wasn't about gaining my parents' approval or proving them wrong, it was about being true to myself and my vision. Standing at my window later that night, watching the city lights twinkle below, I smiled to myself. The quiet girl who'd hidden in the shadows had stepped into her own spotlight, not on a backyard stage, but in the world of business she'd always dreamed of. And this time, the applause was all her own.